The story of Genesis, one of rock music's most influential bands, begins in the late 1960s at Charterhouse School in England, where a group of young friends, Peter Gabriel, Tony Banks, and Mike Rutherford, first started playing together. They shared a dream of breaking free from conventional music and exploring a sound that was imaginative, experimental, and ambitious. These early sessions were chaotic and full of energy. The band went through a formative period where they experimented with organ-driven melodies, inventive rhythms, and dramatic performances, drawing inspiration from the progressive rock movement that was emerging at the time. Early albums like From Genesis to Revelation and Trespass reflected a band still discovering its voice, experimenting with complex arrangements and long, winding songs. It was during this time, in 1970, that Phil Collins, a young drummer from West London who had previously appeared in the musical Oliver, answered an advertisement for a drummer. Collins did not initially aspire to be the singer or the frontman, and in fact, he later admitted that he was reluctant to take on the lead role. However, he joined the band as a drummer, bringing humor, musical talent, and a grounded personality to a group of aristocratic, highly creative musicians. He quickly found a place within the band, amusing Gabriel and Banks with funny stories, and was welcomed as a member whose presence would change Genesis's future. The first lineup, nicknamed by Gabriel as the Silver Spoon Toffee-Nosed Buggers, was both a playful and pointed acknowledgement of their privileged backgrounds, yet Collins fit in immediately, balancing talent with relatability. These formative years laid the foundation for Genesis's progressive rock identity, filled with complex time signatures, imaginative storytelling, and theatrical stagecraft, while also setting the stage for the later dynamics between Gabriel and Collins that would shape both their careers. By the mid-1970s, Genesis had become a successful and ambitious band, but not without internal challenges. Peter Gabriel, now married with a newborn, began to feel constrained by the band's demanding schedule and the expectations of their growing fan base. He was interested in exploring theatrical storytelling, personal artistic projects, vegetarian farming, and spending time with his family, all of which were difficult to pursue within Genesis's structured, rigorous system. In 1975, Gabriel decided to leave the band, though he delayed the announcement to allow the group time to find a replacement. He emphasized in a statement that there was no animosity or bitterness toward his bandmates, clarifying that his departure was about personal growth and creative freedom rather than conflict. The split opened the door for Phil Collins, who had initially only been the drummer, to step into the role of lead singer. Collins approached the challenge with humility and humor, initially joking that the band might continue as an instrumental group, but his natural ability and charm quickly proved him capable of fronting the band. As lead singer, Collins infused Genesis's music with new energy, combining his drumming skills with a melodic, expressive voice that allowed the band to transition from the dense, theatrical epics of the Gabriel era to more accessible, radio-friendly songs. This period saw the release of albums like Duke and Invisible Touch, which featured hits that became global sensations, helping Genesis reach stadium audiences worldwide. While Gabriel explored solo success with songs like Salisbury Hill and ventured into world music and activism, Collins solidified his place not only as a drummer, but as a charismatic voice and face of Genesis, steering the band into a pop-rock era that balanced commercial appeal with the technical sophistication that longtime fans admired. The transition was both seamless and transformative, marking a new chapter in the band's history, while setting up decades of speculation and curiosity about the relationship between Gabriel and Collins. Despite the change in Genesis's lineup, the public and media often speculated about tension between Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Rumors of artistic rivalry were widespread, fueled by fans curious about the contrasting directions each musician took. In truth, both men maintained respect and even friendship behind the scenes. Collins occasionally contributed to Gabriel's work, playing drums on tracks like Intruder and No Self-Control, and in 1982, Gabriel reunited with Genesis for a one-off benefit concert in England, famously called Six of the Best. These moments underscored that any perceived tension was exaggerated, and both men viewed their separation as an opportunity to grow individually. Interviews over the years reinforced this, with Gabriel noting that his departure allowed Collins to emerge as a frontman and shape the band's creative direction, while Collins focused on solo stardom, family, and refining his pop sensibilities. The duo's interactions were occasionally humorous, recalling the early days of the band with jokes about Collins' audition, including stories of missteps and playful antics. Even when they appeared together publicly, there was no finger-pointing or drama. Instead, these events highlighted mutual admiration, shared history, and a recognition that their artistic paths, though different, were complementary in the broader scope of music history. The mythology of feud persisted mainly because it made for sensational storytelling, but the reality was far gentler, characterized by respect, humor, and occasional collaboration. This nuanced dynamic set the stage for later reflections, interviews, and reunions, where both musicians could candidly discuss their experiences without the need for conflict, illustrating a mature and thoughtful perspective that only time and distance can provide. After taking over as lead singer, Phil Collins led Genesis into a new musical era that transformed the band from progressive rock pioneers into mainstream pop rock superstars. Albums such as Duke and Invisible Touch showcase Collins' melodic voice, rhythmic drumming, and an ability to blend complex musicianship with catchy hooks, making Genesis accessible to a wider audience. Songs like Turn On Again, Invisible Touch, Land of Confusion, and Mama became stadium anthems, filling arenas across the globe and defining a generation of rock and pop music fans. Despite the shift toward more radio-friendly songs, Collins retained elements of the band's progressive roots, including layered arrangements, shifting time signatures, and elaborate musical narratives. Fans of the Gabriel era recognized the continuity, even as Collins' era emphasized pop sensibilities and emotionally resonant lyrics. The band's live performances were equally transformative, with Collins' charismatic presence at the front of the stage complementing the band's complex instrumentation. While some critics initially lamented the departure from the more experimental, theatrical style of early Genesis, the commercial success and cultural impact of Collins' era proved that the band could evolve without losing its musical integrity. Meanwhile, Peter Gabriel's solo work flourished in parallel. His album Salisbury Hill became an instant classic, demonstrating his talent for songwriting, storytelling, and blending rock with world music influences. Gabriel also explored ambitious projects, from experimental albums to humanitarian initiatives, emphasizing his artistic freedom and versatility. The coexistence of Collins' commercial success and Gabriel's adventurous solo career illustrated how both musicians pursued distinct creative paths while maintaining mutual respect. Fans watched as the two former bandmates shaped different facets of rock music, with Collins mastering pop rock mastery that appealed to millions worldwide, and Gabriel continuing to innovate with experimental sounds and thought-provoking narratives. Over time, the rumors of feud and rivalry faded into background, replaced by admiration for their respective contributions to music history. Their parallel journeys during the 1980s highlighted the diverse possibilities that emerged when talented artists followed their instincts, and they set the stage for later reflections on the enduring bond formed during their early years in Genesis. Even as their individual careers progressed, Collins and Gabriel occasionally intersected in moments that reminded fans of their shared past. These interactions were rare but meaningful. In 1982, for instance, Gabriel joined Genesis for a benefit concert in England called Six of the Best, which reunited the original members on stage and provided fans with a unique glimpse of their chemistry. Collins' drumming on Gabriel's solo tracks, including Intruder and No Self-Control, also demonstrated the enduring musical connection between the two. Yet, these reunions were always marked by professionalism and mutual respect rather than public displays of rivalry. Both musicians consistently emphasized that their separate paths were motivated by creativity and personal growth, not resentment. The media often misrepresented their interactions, highlighting differences or speculating about tension, but in reality, the relationship between Collins and Gabriel was characterized by shared history, humor, and appreciation for each other's talents. As years went on, Collins focused on balancing his solo career, band commitments, and family life, while Gabriel continued to explore world music, activism, and innovative projects. Even as the decades passed, Collins rarely spoke negatively about Gabriel, and Gabriel himself affirmed that there was no animosity, only different creative priorities. Occasional collaborations and public appearances reminded fans of the bond forged in their early days, and both musicians reflected on these experiences with warmth and nostalgia. Their story demonstrates that personal and artistic differences do not have to devolve into bitterness. Instead, they can coexist with respect, admiration, and shared legacy. These moments also underscore the depth of their influence on rock music, showing that their partnership, even after separation, continued to shape fans' understanding of artistry, innovation, and the power of collaboration in the 2000s and 2010s. Both Collins and Gabriel maintained relatively low public profiles regarding each other, focusing instead on solo work, tours, and personal matters. Collins, in particular, rarely commented on Gabriel in interviews, choosing instead to reflect on his own experiences, health, and family life. This period of quiet fueled speculation among fans and media outlets, with many wondering whether the two former bandmates had unresolved tensions. However, in interviews spanning 2023 to 2025, both musicians finally spoke candidly about their shared history, offering insights that dispelled myths of animosity. Collins, now in his mid-70s, reflected on his health, aging, and the toll of decades in the music industry, admitting that he no longer had the energy or desire to produce new music in the same way. Gabriel, meanwhile, remained creatively active, preparing a follow-up to his album I/O, and participating in interviews that emphasized his continued engagement with the music scene. These discussions highlighted the gentle reconciliation that time had facilitated, demonstrating that their shared experiences in Genesis were far more about friendship, growth, and mutual respect than rivalry. Fans were treated to reflections that balanced honesty with humor, including anecdotes about early rehearsals, Collins' audition, and playful stories from their youth. Even after decades apart, their narratives intertwined, reinforcing the idea that the legacy of Genesis was rooted not in conflict, but in collaboration, shared creativity, and the evolution of two extraordinarily talented musicians who shaped rock music in complementary ways. That Genesis story came full circle in 2022 with their final concerts in London, marking the end of an era for one of rock's most iconic bands. Fans filled arenas, eager to witness the musicians who had shaped decades of music, from the experimental early years to the pop-rock stadium anthems of the 1980s. Peter Gabriel attended as an observer, emphasizing that his presence was not a return to band, but an acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. Phil Collins, now in his early 70s, embraced the moment with characteristic humor and humility, acknowledging the passage of time while honoring the audience and his fellow musicians. During the shows, Collins quipped about Gabriel, joking that maybe he was backstage shouting for old songs, highlighting the playful rapport that persisted even decades after their paths diverged. These concerts serve as a reminder of the enduring bond between the former bandmates and the collaborative spirit that had driven Genesis music from the very beginning. Audiences responded not only to the songs, but also to the subtle acknowledgement of decades of shared history, illustrating that the band's legacy was built on both musical innovation and interpersonal connection. For Collins and Gabriel, the farewell concerts represented closure, celebration, and a reaffirmation of the respect and admiration that had quietly persisted despite public speculation about conflict or rivalry. The events reinforced the notion that the story of Genesis was never truly about competition, but about artistic exploration, friendship, and the evolution of talented musicians who managed to impact the world profoundly, individually, and collectively. The shared experience of performing, even in this final context, underscored the idea that music can transcend time, differences, and personal ambitions, creating a legacy that continues to inspire fans and musicians alike. In the years following Genesis' final tour, Phil Collins spoke more openly about his life, health, and priorities, offering candid reflections that revealed the realities of aging as a music icon. At 74, Collins admitted to struggles with physical illness and the toll decades of performing had taken on his body, particularly his ability to play drums and maintain the stamina required for touring. Despite these challenges, he retained a sense of humor and perspective, acknowledging that while he could no longer perform at the same intensity, he still had enough strength in his voice to sing familiar songs for fans. Collins' interviews also emphasized the importance of family, particularly supporting his wife and children and finding contentment outside of the music industry. He made it clear that producing new music was not a priority, reflecting a shift from professional ambition to personal fulfillment and well-being. These candid admissions helped fans understand the human side of a rock legend, highlighting the realities that often go unseen behind a glamour and acclaim. By speaking openly about his limitations, Collins balanced honesty with dignity, showing that aging does not diminish his influence or the value of his contributions. At the same time, these reflections provided context for his earlier reticence regarding Peter Gabriel, illustrating that decades of quiet about past band dynamics were less about tension and more about focus on personal growth and health. Fans appreciated this transparency, which painted a full picture of Collins not just as a musician, but as a man navigating the later stages of life with humor, grace, and resilience. It was a reminder that the legacy of a musician is measured not only in songs and albums, but also in the integrity and humanity displayed in later years. While Collins focused on his personal life and reflections, Peter Gabriel remained actively engaged in music, demonstrating a different approach to aging and artistic output. Gabriel continued to record, tour selectively, and explore innovative projects, showing that his creative energy had not diminished. His follow-up to the album I/O, referred to as Oi I/O, reflected his commitment to experimentation and world music influences, blending familiar sounds with fresh ideas. In interviews, Gabriel shared stories from the studio, his creative process, and reflections on Genesis' origins, highlighting the continuity between his past and present work. He maintained a thoughtful and philosophical approach to music, emphasizing artistic exploration over commercial success, and his ongoing contributions demonstrated that creativity can thrive well into later years. Gabriel's continued activity contrasted with Collins' more reflective period, but the differences in approach were never a source of public conflict. Rather, they illustrated how two musicians could follow separate paths, each remaining